Bernar Frischer in Rome on December 20th, 2011, and I'm happy to greet Marina De Franceschini, a great archaeologist specializing in Hadrian's Villa, and Michael Ytterberg, a architect, very successful architect with a big practice in Philadelphia, who also has a PhD in architectural history specializing on Hadrian's Villa, which he's been working on since the mid-1980s. Thanks for coming here to talk to us today. We just want to talk very briefly about the sense in which you think the villa might be a kind of reflection of Hadrian the man. Is it a kind of self-portrait? I mean, he did commission it and perhaps even designed some of the buildings in it and laid out gardens, perhaps chose statues. So, and it's so big and has so many different features. How do these features line up with what we know about Hadrian the man from the historical sources? Why don't we start with Michael? Does that work? Is it a kind of self-portrait?
Well, I think you could say, as we said yesterday about names and villa places, that any wealthy person's home or estate is a sort of self-representation because it is reflecting his or her tastes and a selection of those elements available to him or her to create their own environment. Yes. So at a very basic level, you have to say yes. Though there are many really interesting things about Hadrian. For one, he's on the short list of architect heads of states. This is not to say that he had to be a professional architect, but like, say, Thomas Jefferson or even George Washington in America are an example of heads of state who designed their own homes. Yes. And very famous homes. And so there aren't many rulers throughout history who did this, and Hadrian is one of this select few. But then there's the question of that Hadrian was unusual even for a Roman emperor in the fact that he was given to flamboyant histrionic acts, which seemed on one hand to be very personal and yet frequently had astute political consequences. And in this sense, the villa is the largest of its kind, the most elaborate of its kind, a feast of architecture and art, which other emperors who built, every emperor or most emperors built villas, but none quite like Hadrian. So in this sense, too, it reflects unique aspects of Hadrian.
Well, let's talk about some of the specific features of Hadrian's personality that comes across in the sources. For example, we're told he loved to hunt. We're told he was a Philhellene. He loved Greek culture. We're told that he also, though, loved the Roman games, the gladiatorial combats and animal hunts in the Colosseum. Marina, do you see the villa as reflecting those interests that the sources tell us about?
The villa mainly was a way to show the power of the emperor. And this is a tradition that is dating back to the Hellenistic world and even before to Persian and to Egypt. The power was shown with the wealth of the architecture, of the decoration and everything. Of course, this was an expression of the emperor because everybody is, as you said, is building his own palace according to his taste. And also he was able to call the best architects. Of course, we don't know the names. But another thing that I think is important is to remember that what we know about Hadrian from ancient sources depends on what they wanted to prove and to say. Because, for example, we know we have these biographies about Nero or other emperors who had the damnatio memoriae, so we just get the worst part of their image. In the case of Hadrian, they tried to strike the connection with Augustus because he wanted to be the new Augustus. He restored peace, he was so religious, so all the qualities of Hadrian are part of this image.
Except that Augustus, according to Suetonius anyway, didn't have a villa. He stayed in the villas of his freedmen, and Hadrian has this great villa. Do you see?
Because Augustus had the Villa of Livy at Prima Porta.
Others in his circle had villas, but he tried to show he was modest. He's famous for having a small house, the Palatine, which we now know wasn't so small by Roman standards, although compared to later emperors it was small. But So anyway, maybe in that one sense, Hadrian's a little bit different by having such a great villa that is
Yeah,
Hadrian's
of course,
villa, known
yeah,
as
yeah.
Hadrian's villa.
Because Hadrian's reign is the highlight of Roman Empire. Trajan was the emperor that brought the empire to the largest extension. So after him, Hadrian was really at the top, and his villa is really at the top of Roman architecture.
Let me ask you both this final question. In view of everything we're saying, why did Hadrian choose this site for the villa? Is it because it was near good hunting and we were just there hearing the shots of hunters over the weekend? The sources of waters, the cascades of Tivoli, or the 4 aqueducts coming down from the Apennines, bringing the public aqueduct water so close that he could tap into, perhaps? What was it? Was it its proximity to Rome? It's closer than certainly the villas of Tiberius, for example. What would you say about his choice? And I'll ask you then, Michael.
Many reasons. So the first one could be that it was a fashionable place.
It was a fashionable place.
So it was a status symbol to have a villa there, and
Yeah.
after him even more. But we know that since Republican times there were very important villa, and it also seems that Augustus had a villa quite closer to the Temple of Hercules, where now is the Tempio della Tosse, which was supposed to be built probably on the original entrance of this villa. The other reason is the presence of water. Water is one of the main ingredients of the villa. So there you have plenty of water for all the fountains. I made a comparison with the Villa d'Este that gives you an idea of what the villa could have been, with water flowing everywhere. The other reason is building material, because we have a pozzolana, we have tufa, and so they had immediately there all the basic stuff that was needed to build. Then they had marbles arrive from all over the world.
Oddly enough, he doesn't use much travertine, which comes from Tivoli, does he? We don't find that.
No, we found very little. It's mainly is used for the supporting blocks, for the scaffoldings inside the Cento Camerelle or the Praetorium.
Yes.
But
So not a very prestigious stone.
No.
Probably.
And if you think that for all the thresholds and water basins, they were using Carrara marble, which at the time was the marble of Luni, and that was coming from Tuscany. But he didn't have problems about that. So.
Well, thank you. Let me ask Michael why he thinks the villa site was chosen at Tivoli. And that's why didn't Hadrian go to the top of a mountain or out to the sea or something like that?
Well, those were all very good reasons that Marina enumerated, and very compelling. The only thing I might add in addition to that might be that the site is relatively flat, with a moderate compared to adjacent sites on hillsides or mountaintops, as you suggest, and perhaps this abetted the architectural experimentation that he was interested in doing. That is, it provided sites for these complexes, individual sub-complexes of which the villa is composed, right? And so it gave the ability to experiment with the architecture in a way that perhaps a more demanding site might have overly influenced the architecture.
And I want to just ask you one more point before we stop this short conversation. You make a great deal about a very valid distinction between the parts of the villa that relate to otium, to leisure, and to negotium, to business. What about the choice of the site because of its proximity to Rome? If you were going to use the site not simply as a retreat for otium, for leisure, but also for negotium, for work, it's a kind of government retreat. You could have the government, the court there. People could come from Rome and do a day trip and maybe even get back to Rome the same day. So do you think that the proximity to Rome, and especially if you think of other villas, Nero's and Subiaco, which is 2 full days away from Rome, as I say, Tiberius is either at Sperlonga or even farther away, Capri, that was a factor?
No doubt. As I mentioned earlier, that no act of in retrospect, of course, we're reading things into Hadrian's act that from many centuries later. That there are all these things which seem so personal, and they invariably had a political aspect, and so the choice of the villa site could never be entirely personal. It has to have also been influenced by political factors, as you suggest.
And practical considerations.
Yes.
No, I would like to add another thing. Why not in Rome? And I believe that one of the reasons was space, in the sense that, for example, Nero, when he built the Domus Aurea that was going from one side of the town to the other, that really broke into Rome.
And it was very unpopular.
It was very unpopular. So if Hadrian had wanted to build something like Hadrian's Villa in Rome, he would have had to do this exactly the same thing. And instead he didn't want to be the new Nero. This could be one of the reasons that he wanted to go away, and he chose a place where he had all the space that he wanted.
Definitely. Nero was an example of an equally flamboyant emperor who did everything without the political instincts
Yes.
that Hadrian had,
Yes.
that enabled him to achieve his flamboyant acts without
Bringing it
unduly
Yes.
creating a backlash.
Well, let me thank you both very much, Marina, for coming down to Rome from northern Italy, Michael Ytterberg coming all the way to Rome from Philadelphia. It's been great to have you the past few days. Thanks for helping us, for making these videos. We appreciate your participation in the project.
Thank you for calling us. Also.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mhm.